I sometimes have nightmares about a world of echoes, in which there are only echoes, and echoes of echoes, and echoes of echoes of echoes, reverberating forever down the empty corridors of my mind. Now, here comes a problem, though, is how do you make your mind still? The method in Zen is a method of exasperation. They, of course, advocate various technical aids to making your mind still, such as the practice of Zazen, which is sitting, usually cross-legged, on cushions, in a long hall, and counting your breath, so as to eliminate from consciousness any other thought than that of the counting of the breath. And this eventually results in a state of stillness. Only that's not enough, because the skillful teacher feels that this kind of stillness is not yet true stillness. It's forced. And he's trying to get you to a point where it will never be necessary for you to force your mind to be still, but where it can be so quite naturally. And he can only do that by tricks, which are called upaya in Sanskrit, hoben in Japanese, which means skillful means. In pedagogy, upaya means the tricks of the teacher's trade, how he gets attention, how he helps you to understand something. In politics, upaya means cunning, deceit. Has a sort of a bad meaning in politics. And so the Zen teacher uses all sorts of tricks to get you away from the fallacy of trying to make your mind still by force, which is like trying to smooth rough water with a flat iron. All you do is stir it up. I am thinking that I am trying not to think. I am annoyed with myself because I am not successful, etc., etc. I should be successful. All these are disturbances. All these considerations, they're off the point. But how to get people off them? You have to reach a point, in other words, where you learn to leave your mind alone as you leave rough water alone, so that it becomes smooth of itself. But while you conceive you're waiting for this to happen, you're still stirring it up. You therefore have to get rid of the sensation that there is you, the thinker, watching the thoughts. You, the feeler, separate from and trying to control the feelings. Because so long as that separation exists, you'll have trouble. And therefore the function of the koans, the problems, like what is the sound of one hand, is to lead you to the natural seeing through of, debunking of, the concept of the separate thinker and the separate experiencer. So that when you find out that the thinker and the thoughts are not different, then you'll have less and less trouble in allowing the thoughts to become quiet. It's difficult for us to understand this simply because of our language. When we say knowing or thinking, we always feel that this is a function or activity of someone who thinks and knows. That's because we are tied up with this subject-verb-predicate language structure. Now, the same problem is approached from a somewhat different point of view and with a different style, but essentially the same principles are being used in the philosophy of Krishnamurti. Only it comes in a very different way. Because although Krishnamurti is an Indian, and thus we would say in the United States a Hindu, he doesn't present himself as affiliated with any kind of religious or philosophical organization. He comes on simply as Mr. Krishnamurti. And he doesn't present any gimmicks, any obvious techniques, because according to his view, all these special practices are hindrances. In other words, supposing a group of people take up Zen Buddhism. Before you know where you are, they have become a club, a special in-group, and they're the Zen people, and they're going to sell this thing. They're going to say, you should try our Zen, you know. You may be a Christian Scientist, you may be a Catholic, you may be a Seventh-day Adventist, you may be a Theosophist, and all these ways have something to be said for them. But the real thing is our Zen. And then, of course, they all start sitting in meditation posture, and they put up hanging scrolls and burn incense and have Buddhas and gongs and so on. And all that can be used as a sort of social or cultural one-upmanship. And this is a very serious obstacle. Now then, Krishnamurti comes on without any bells or robes. He addresses his audience wearing grey flannel pants and a white open shirt. That's it. And he talks without any spiritual technicalities or even philosophical technicalities. Absolutely dispenses with them. All he really does is ask questions. And therefore he seems to many people as a total debunker who has nothing positive to offer. His approach is invariably one of this. You propose the question. In other words, you asked him to come here. Why? What is it you're looking for? And you ask a question, for example, because actually many of his original followers came out of a theosophical background. They perpetually ask the question like, is there such a thing as reincarnation? Did I have a past life? Will I have a future life? And instead of either saying yes or no, he comes back with, why do you ask? Is there a God? Why do you ask? Go into it. Go into the state of mind you have when you voice that question. Why are you voicing it? Well, people will defend themselves for a long time when faced with that. They'll say, well, I'm curious. Or, isn't it one's purpose in life to find out these things? He said, what makes you think it's your purpose in life? Does someone tell you so and you believed it? Why do you think that's your purpose in life? And you have to back off a little bit and say, well, I suppose the real reason why I want to know whether there's going to be a future life is that I'm afraid of death. Why are you afraid of death? Well, I don't want to lose my continuity. Aha! So that's the reason, is it? You are clinging to yourself. Yeah. Well, he would say, how can you possibly understand God or anything of a spiritual nature while you're clinging to yourself? Aren't these two activities mutually exclusive? If you want to know what truth is, you must be open to truth, whatever it is. But if you say only that truth will be acceptable to me, which supports my conception of my ego, then you're not open. And you say, yes, I see. But then you say, how can I be open? He says, why do you want to be? See, you're just doing the same old thing again. You ask me how to be unselfish. But what is your reason for wanting to be unselfish? You don't want to be unselfish at all. You want to find a new way of getting around it all. Now, in this manner, he absolutely exasperates people. Because he'll never agree with anything anybody says. If they formulate it and say, Mr. Krishnamurti, is that what you mean? He says, no. Now, look, go into it again. Don't make a formulation, he says. Don't come to a conclusion. Don't want to have a resolution of this. Just be, if you can, open to what is, to what you actually feel now. Don't judge it. Don't say it should be, shouldn't be. What is it? Say, when you're in a state of grief, what is grief? Don't say a word. Don't try to pin it down. Don't give a definition. Just experience whatever you have labeled as grief. I often ask people when they say they're anxious or something, where are you anxious? And they say, all over. Oh, I say, come now. How do you know you're anxious? What symptoms are there going on in you that tell you you're anxious? Then they begin to notice things in their stomach and headachy things or whatever it may be. And then they come to a more concrete apprehension of the state of affairs that they have labeled anxiety. And in this way, which is really very like Zen because it's frustrating, people come to see there's absolutely nothing they can do at all to stop being selfish. They see after a while that trying to stop being selfish is the same thing as selfishness. Trying to get rid of grief is grief. And so when you see that, there comes a point which we could best call giving up, surrender. William James pointed this out likewise in his study of the varieties of religious experience and the psychology of conversion. There's the point of absolute frustration followed by surrender. And then in that moment of surrender, when you see you just can't do anything about it, you suddenly have a quiet mind. There is no further effort, you see, to say the thinker and the thoughts are one. That's a formulation. The experiencer and the experience are one experiencing. You don't need to say that, because that's not the point. The formulation of it is not the point. It is the actual experiencing itself that is the point. But you can't come to that while you are going over in your mind all this chatter about I should accept my experience, I should not accept my experience, etc. As a matter of fact, when psychologists sometimes say, you should accept yourself, a lot of people just don't, you know. They're always fighting with themselves, clubbing themselves, and allegedly disciplining themselves. And then they get into tremendous clutch-ups inside, and the psychologist says, now come, you're human, you should accept yourself. You shouldn't feel guilty if you get angry. It's very natural to get angry. Accept yourself. So people try to accept themselves. But then they come across the fact that there are certain things they do not and cannot accept, and they have to accept the fact that they can't accept them. Accept that you don't accept. And then that's the same bind as Buddha put people in when he said, in order not to suffer, you must get rid of desire. But then people find out that they desire to get rid of desire. So you see, that saying, accept yourself, is a gimmick. And it's an upaya. And the object of it is to bring you to the state where you see that the self which does the accepting is the one you need to accept. And in this state where you're confronted with the necessity of licking your own tongue, you suddenly see that what you thought was to be accepted and what was to do the accepting are all one. It's a very awkward feeling at this moment. R.H. Blythe described it beautifully. You were about to swat a fly, but the fly jumped up and sat on the swatter. You were about to punch the world in the nose, and the nose became the same as the fist. And of course, in that moment one feels awkward. Just as I described in the first talk, the situation of feeling that you and the environment are all one process. At first, that is nonplussing. You're just not used to feeling it that way. Because if the stream of thought or the stream of experience is the same as the experiencer, who's in control? Well, it controls itself. It's what the Chinese call ziran, of itself so, which is their word for nature. And in their organic theory of nature, there is no one in control who stands outside and above the organic system itself. It's the organic system, it controls itself. It's full of the same sort of balances that any organic system has. Because if it didn't have that, it wouldn't be organic, it'd be merely chaotic. So we get back, you see, to what is fundamental in Chinese, Far Eastern psychology, that any ongoing system must trust itself. And therefore, the attitude of these people to human nature is rather different from ours. They would say human nature is basically to be trusted. Not that there's anyone outside it to trust or mistrust it. But they would say, if you don't trust your own nature, how can you trust your mistrust? How can you know that even that's reliable? Because that's all part of you. Now, they will say, yes, in human nature, there are passions, there is greed, there is anger, there is an aggressive tendency. But what is good about human nature is it's good and bad. Confucius once said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. And he exalted above mere goodness in the sense of following a legal righteousness something called in Chinese ren, which means human-heartedness, being a complete human. Now, a complete human is always a little bit of a rascal. Not too much of a rascal. The point is that you have a little rascality and you like to put salt in the stew. Now, you certainly don't want the stew to be all salt. But when it's without salt, it's sort of flat. And don't you feel that with very good people? They're awfully dull. You know, when there's a certain kind of oppressive goodness about people of a certain kind, I won't make any labels. But when you come into that, there's something about it that, again, you know, you're sitting on the edge of your chair. Jung once said he met a man in whom he could find no human failings whatsoever. And he was terribly disturbed, because he thought, really, if that's possible, I should put my own life in order. But he said, never again will I be deceived. A few days later, I met his wife. Now, it wasn't that his wife said, you think my husband's good, you should see him when no one else is around except me. Oh, no, it wasn't that at all. It was the wife who was living in her husband's shadow. She was living out in her life all the things that he repressed in his. And that can easily happen in a very close human association. She, in other words, was the incarnation of his shadow. We all cast a shadow. And it's better to carry your own than to stick it on someone else. In talking to a great Zen master, he once said, I really have no other ideal than to be a complete human being. And so that means not only flowers on the top, but manure around the roots. The totality, which true humility is, after all, the recognition of this situation. And it's only when we get to be proud of our humility, you see, that we're in difficulty. I sometimes wonder a little bit with Krishnamurti whether he may not be sometimes too earnest. But I realize that that is his public facade because of the tremendous earnestness with which he is trying to get his listeners to be fully here and now. And when they escape from the moment, either by comments attempting to get definitions or even by laughing, he keeps pulling them back to the absolutely immediate experience. And therefore, within, he's really at his best in rather intimate sessions with people, where he likes to sit around in a ring with people, and instead of giving a lecture, conduct this dialogue, back and forth. The questions come, and then he throws the question back to the questioner. Why did you ask? Look at it. Are you really listening? He said most people don't listen. They wait for the speaker to express their own opinion, and when he doesn't, they don't listen. They try to make sense out of the words, and I was saying to you earlier on, sometimes it's very important to listen to the sound of the speaker's voice rather than trying to follow the meaning of the words. Indians, American Indians, very often do that. If they want to know what a man really is like and what his true character is, they listen to the sound of his voice, no matter what he has to say. You can be awfully distracted by what a person has to say and not see what kind of a villain is coming up against you.